They expected tears. They eagerly gathered to watch me break as my ex-husband married a billionaire's daughter. Placement at a dark table by the kitchen doors just to remind me of my place. Victoria Sinclair wanted an absolute public execution of my dignity, but she miscalculated. When the heavy iron gates of the Hamptons estate slid open, I didn't walk in hiding my face. I marched in flanked by my 3 identical sons, 3 miniature kings with the unmistakable gray eyes of the groom. The 4-year-old secret I fiercely protected was about to turn their picture-perfect high society wedding into an absolute bloodbath. The ocean breeze carried the heavy, suffocating scent of thousands of white roses, an expensive display designed to intimidate anyone who dared to question the Sinclair dynasty. Inside the VIP suite, Victoria shifted her diamond necklace, her eyes narrowed like a predator tracking its prey. Michael stood near the window, his hand trembling as he swirled his whiskey. I still think inviting Sophia is a mistake. It's petty. It is a necessity, Michael. I want you to see her in cheap clothes, looking tired and aged, so you realize the massive favor I did by saving you from that common waitress. Isabella is old money. Isabella is perfect. But she hadn't even replied to the text. A mile down the road, a convoy of 3 pitch-black Cadillac Escalades rolled quietly toward the security checkpoint. I sat in the lead vehicle, smoothing down my custom emerald green Versace gown. It clung to my skin like liquid glass. Next to me, Leo, Sam, and Matthew were buckled into their seats, looking like tiny princes in their matching velvet suits. Midnight blue, burgundy, and forest green. Remember our rule, boys? Be polite, Leo whispered. No running, Sam added. Stick together, Matthew smiled. Good boys. The window glided down as the guard approached with a clipboard. His face twisted in a heavy frown. Shuttle parking is Lot B, ma'am. I lowered my designer sunglasses, looking him dead in the eye. Open the gate, I commanded. My voice held the absolute authority of a CEO used to ruling boardrooms. The guard stammered, completely thrown off by the sheer power vibrating from the vehicle. He didn't argue. He waved us through. As the motorcade pulled up directly to the VIP entrance, an expectant hush fell over the high society crowd. Victoria froze mid-sip on the terrace. First, my Christian Louboutin heels stepped onto the gravel. Then I emerged, standing tall and radiant. Whispers rippled through the senators and billionaires. Is that her? No. Impossible. That is haute couture. I turned back, extending my hand. Come on, my loves, one at a time. When the triplets stepped out, a collective gasp swept the lawn. The dark wavy hair. The piercing gray eyes. They were exact flawless replicas of Michael Sinclair at 4 years old. Victoria dropped her champagne glass. It shattered violently on the stone patio, the sound echoing sharply in the dead silence. Michael gripped the railing, all color draining from his face as the math hit him like a freight train. 4 years. I took my son's hands, and the crowd parted for us like the Red Sea. The cream-colored envelope had arrived at my Fifth Avenue penthouse smelling of Victoria's signature custom fragrance. 4 years ago, Michael had signed the divorce papers without even looking me in the eyes, letting his mother throw a measly settlement check at my feet as if paying off a maid. They kicked me out with a single suitcase, pregnant, terrified, and utterly alone. Mommy, who is that? Leo had asked, tugging my silk pajamas while his brothers built a pillow fort. Nobody important, sweetie. Go play. I had tossed that invitation onto the marble island. My assistant Jasmine looked up from her iPad. Let me guess. The Sinclairs? Victoria wants to rub it in my face that Michael is marrying a senator's daughter. She still thinks I'm the broke waitress who could barely afford to eat. She has no idea. I never told Michael about the pregnancy. If Victoria had found out, she would have used their fortune to rip my babies away, turning my life into a legal nightmare. So I ran. I worked 18 hours a day with 3 infants strapped to my chest. I used my last savings to launch a branding agency. Then, a viral campaign for a tech titan changed everything. Today, Sophia Evans was no longer a commoner. I was the CEO of Evans & Associates. My net worth was triple their dwindling family fortune. There were nights in that cramped, drafty studio apartment when the silence of the city felt like a heavy weight crushing my chest. The boys would finally fall asleep, their tiny breaths synchronized, and I would sit at the kitchen table illuminated only by the cold blue light of my cheap laptop. My hands would shake from exhaustion, but my mind was absolute ice. Every mocking laugh from Victoria, every silent, spineless look from Michael encoded itself into the lines of code and marketing strategies I built. I remember looking at a single dollar bill left in my wallet, counting the days until the next formula milk run. Normal people would have broken. They would have crawled back, begging for table scraps from the Sinclair estate. But every time rage threatened to boil over, I forced it down, turning it into fuel. I didn't want their pity. I wanted to build something so unassailable that they could never reach me again. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about engineering an empire from the absolute dust they threw me into. Jasmine looked at my face, recognizing the exact expression I wore right before closing a multi-million-dollar deal. Sophia, what are you doing? Clear my schedule, Jasmine. Order the boys custom-tailored suits. If Victoria wants a family reunion, it's time she meets her grandsons. Instead of walking to table 19 near the restrooms, I marched my son straight to the front row, the VIP section strictly reserved for the groom's immediate family. A terrified usher tried to block me. Ma'am, this section is only for immediate family. I pointed down at the triplets. You'll find absolutely no one closer to the groom than his own children. We sat down. The tension was so thick it could have bent steel. Victoria didn't run. She marched down from the terrace, her face a mask of absolute fury. She leaned into my space, reeking of champagne. What is the meaning of this? How dare you turn my son's wedding into a circus? I told you to sit in the back. I casually brushed a speck of lint off Sam's velvet collar. Hello, Victoria. You look stressed. Did you get a new surgeon? Get out right now. Take those brats and leave before I have security drag you out by your hair. I won't be doing that. I have the RSVP confirmation on my phone. And as for dragging us out, look around. The senator is watching. Judge Cross is watching. If your guards touch a single hair on my head, I will sue you for assault in front of all New York high society. And this time, I have the money to bury you. Victoria hesitated, her eyes sliding to the boys. The physical resemblance was a brutal blow. Who are they? They are my +3s. Just then, Michael appeared at the head of the aisle, looking like a man walking to the gallows. He stopped dead, staring openly. Matthew tilted his head, a habit identical to Michael's own. Mommy, he looks like me. Michael shuddered. Sophia. Tell me. What are they? Michael, these are the sons you didn't want. Oh, wait. You didn't know because you were too busy moving your mistress into our bedroom before the ink on our divorce papers was even dry. Mistress? A billionaire's wife whispered in the second row. The exact narrative Victoria tried to bury was cracking open. I didn't know. Michael stammered, tears welling. How old are they? 4. They turned 4 last week. The math is simple, Michael. Or do you need a calculator? It's a scam. Victoria spat, shoving herself between us. Don't be an idiot, Michael. She hired child actors who vaguely look like you just to ruin your day. She's a vindictive gold digger. Let's look at the alternative scenario, Victoria. Imagine if I had stepped into this garden as the weak, fractured girl you broke 4 years ago. You would have signaled those guards, and they would have dragged me across the gravel without a second thought. The headlines would have read, Crazed ex-wife disrupts society wedding. You would have won, buried the truth, and kept your pristine legacy intact. But you failed to run the risk parameters. If a single guard moves toward my children today, the live stream running from my assistant's device goes directly to 3 major news networks. The legal notices for child support and corporate fraud are already sitting on Judge Cross's desk. I didn't come here hoping for your kindness or expecting a sudden burst of maternal guilt. I structured this entrance like a hostile takeover. If you choose war, you lose the estate by dinner. If you choose peace, you survive a little longer on my terms. The illusion of your absolute power vanished the moment you failed to realize that I am no longer the target. I am the architect of your downfall. The heavy organ swelled, and the bridal chorus began. Victoria shoved Michael toward the altar. He walked reluctantly, constantly looking back at his sons. The heavy doors opened, and Isabel Montgomery appeared in custom Vera Wang, escorted by her father, the senator. But as she walked down the long aisle, her photo-ready smile faltered. Half the guests weren't looking at her. They were craning their necks to look at the woman in the emerald dress. Isabel reached the altar, her eyes darting. Michael's palms were drenched in sweat. The minister droned on about fidelity, the words ringing hollow. Then came the customary pause before the vows. The tent went dead silent. "I'm hungry," Leo said clearly. "Shoo," I murmured, pulling a graham cracker from my clutch. The loud crunch echoed like a gunshot. Victoria signaled a beefy security guard in the shadows, making a sharp slicing motion across her throat. "Get them out." As the guard lunged toward us, I calmly stood up. "Sit down," Victoria hissed. I ignored her, raising one manicured hand to stop the guard, then looked directly at the groom. "Michael, your mother is sending a guard to forcefully remove your children. Is this how you want to start your marriage? By throwing your own flesh and blood into the street again?" The minister stopped. Isabel dropped Michael's hands, her voice shrill. "Children? Michael, what is she talking about?" "She's lying," Victoria screamed. "Security, drag her out." "It's not a lie." A deep booming voice echoed from the back. Striding down the aisle was Dr. Alexander Sinclair, Michael's uncle, a world-renowned geneticist who had avoided Victoria for years. He stopped, examining the triplets closely. "I know the Sinclair family trait when I see it. Partial heterochromia of the iris. Show him, sweetie." Leo blinked up into the sunlight. His left mong mat was a piercing gray, but there was a distinct, bright gold fleck right in the center. "Michael has it," Alexander addressed the stunned crowd. "My father had it. It is an extremely rare genetic anomaly highly specific to our bloodline. Unless this woman magically found 3 child actors who share this rare ocular defect. Those are your sons, Michael." In elite dynasties like the Sinclairs, power is often preserved through an toxic mechanism known as generational emotional starvation. Victoria Sinclair didn't control her son Michael out of pure malice. She did it because her own identity was entirely dependent on external validation and structural status. When a family wealth begins to dry up, as behavioral psychologists note, the matriarch's control behavior does not soften. It undergoes hyperescalation. They weaponize inheritance and social prestige because those are the only tools they possess. Michael's absolute paralysis for 4 years was a classic symptom of enmeshment trauma, where the child is trained to view the parent's ego as their own survival mechanism. The moment Sophia introduced a genetic reality, the triplets, and financial dominance, she broke this behavioral loop. She didn't just expose a secret. She exposed the psychological bankruptcy of an entire legacy that forgot how to exist without a checkbook to define their human value. "You have kids?" Isabel whispered, stepping back. "Triplets? And you never told me?" "I didn't know," Michael cried, his entire facade crumbling. "I didn't tell him because your mother threatened to destroy me," I interjected, my voice crisp. "Because I knew she would use your money to take my babies and raise them to be cold, ruthless, and cruel. So I saved them. I didn't come to stop a wedding." "But the show has started." Senator Montgomery's face turned purple with rage. He shoved Michael backward. "You've humiliated my daughter. You bastard." "They are not bastards," I corrected. "They were conceived during a legal marriage. They are the legitimate heirs to the Sinclair fortune, and by law, they are entitled to a substantial portion of it." Victoria let out a choked gasp and slumped dramatically into her chair. Nobody helped her. "I can't do this," Isabel sobbed, ripping her veil off. "You're a liar, and your mother is a monster. I am not becoming a stepmother to triplets." She grabbed her skirt and sprinted up the aisle, her parents storming out behind her. Phones were out, recording everything. The hashtag Sinclair wedding disaster was already trending. Michael stood entirely alone, utterly broken. I checked my diamond watch. Well, that was faster than I anticipated. Boys say bye to daddy. The fallout was swift. By Monday, the triplets' faces were plastered on every tabloid. On Wednesday, I was served with an emergency custody petition, Sinclair versus Evans. Victoria was attempting a war of attrition, hiring Sterling, Pierce, and associates to bleed me dry. On Friday, I walked into their grand mahogany boardroom wearing a pristine white power suit. Victoria sat at the head, arrogant. Michael sat next to her, unshaven and exhausted. Slick attorney Pierce smiled like a snake. "Miss Evans, do you admit you deliberately hid these children from their biological father?" I admit that I fiercely protected my children from a family with a heavily documented history of emotional abuse, I said, sliding a thick red folder across the polished table. Objection. Speculation. It's a matter of public record, I countered. Victoria's past restraining orders and sworn testimonies from nannies detailing severe verbal abuse. A family court judge will find it highly relevant that the grandmother petitioning for custody has a history of locking children in the attic as a disciplinary measure. Michael snapped his head toward his mother. You did that, Mom? She's lying. Victoria shrieked. Victoria thought she could hide her financial decay behind high iron gates and legacy public relations. She forgot that in the modern corporate world, every dollar leaves a digital fingerprint. When you command $100 million firm, you don't guess, you audit. My corporate security team didn't just stumble upon her private second mortgages or her hidden communication records with Senator Montgomery. We spent 6 months tracking the capital flight through shell companies in Delaware and offshore accounts in the Caymans. Every asset, every desperate phone call to financial institutions, and even the heavily guarded home address of her slick attorney, Pierce, was mapped out by elite forensic investigators. In the digital age, aristocratic arrogance is no match for weaponized data. They treated me like a broke waitress who knew nothing of their world, completely blind to the fact that my agency specializes in manipulating corporate narratives. I didn't just predict their bankruptcy. I owned the paper it was printed on before they even realized they were sinking. Pierce tried to intervene. Miss Evans, the Sinclairs are an American institution. They provide political connections and elite legacy. I laughed loudly, the sound echoing off the walls. The Sinclairs sold their last major real estate in 1995. According to my forensic team, you are drowning in debt. You took a second mortgage on the Hamptons estate just to pay for a wedding that didn't happen. You are broke. You are sinking. Dead silence. Victoria's eyes bugged out. You aren't suing because you love those boys. You need leverage. You want control of the trust funds they will inherit from Michael's grandfather. Michael looked at his mother with pure disgust. Mom, is that true? I rested a hand on Michael's shoulder. I will let you see the boys, Michael. On my terms. No lawyers. No Victoria. You commute to the city, stay in a hotel, and visit them under my strict supervision. You get to know them as a father, not as props for a ruined empire. I want that, Michael whispered. And you, I pointed at Victoria, drop this lawsuit right now and sign an ironclad NDA. If you breach it, I hand this red folder, including the audio recording of your political bribe to Senator Montgomery, directly to the New York Times. Sign the papers, Mom, Michael said firmly, standing up. My legacy is 3 little boys I don't even know. He dropped the suit. As I turned to leave, I paused at the glass door. Oh, and Victoria? I bought the underlying mortgage to your Hamptons estate this morning. Technically, you're living in my house now. Don't worry, I won't evict you immediately. Just make sure the landscaping is always perfect. There is a profound economic paradox within old money institutions facing decline. The maintenance of the illusion of wealth costs far more than the actual possession of it. Sociologists refer to this as the luxury trap of attrition. When the Sinclair oil investments collapsed, their intrinsic value plummeted, yet their social overhead remained astronomical. The Hamptons' wedding wasn't a celebration. It was a desperate liquidity event disguised as high society romance. They needed the Montgomery political capital to secure fresh credit lines. Sophia's ultimate power move wasn't just hoarding $100 million. It was understanding that debt is the ultimate equalizer. By quietly purchasing the underlying mortgage of the Sinclair estate, she shifted from an ousted outsider to the primary institutional creditor. She turned their ancestral home into a liability, proving that in modern capitalism, a functional branding firm beats a decaying bloodline every single time. 2 weeks later, the rain tapped gently against my penthouse windows. The elevator chimed and Michael stepped out, stripped of his tuxedo, wearing a casual sweater and carrying 3 gift bags. He dropped to one knee at eye level with his sons. I didn't know you existed, he whispered, his voice thick. If I had known, I would have come looking for you a long time ago. He spent the next hour sitting cross-legged on the floor, covered in sparkly craft glue, desperately trying to fix a model train while 3 loud toddlers climbed all over him. He was awkward, but he tried. I missed everything, Michael whispered to me later, his eyes red. Because I was too weak to stand up to her. You're here now, I said. Don't promise them forever, Michael. Just promise them next Saturday. I promise, he said fiercely. As the boys napped, Michael held Leo against his chest, a single tear falling as he felt unconditional love for the first time. The legal war was over. The empire belonged to me. I had raised the heirs to the throne, but I was raising them to be the kings of their own independent lives. Victoria remained isolated in a crumbling mansion, a bitter queen stripped of power. The greatest revenge isn't screaming. It's living a life so incredibly successful and brilliant that the people who tried to destroy you become nothing more than a pathetic footnote in your biography. Disclaimer: this video is created for the sole purpose of entertainment. All situations, characters, and stories in this video are fictional and are built entirely using artificial intelligence technology. We hope you have a relaxing time.